I'm Tori Fields. I'm one of the clinic staff members as well as the internship manager. So I've been at Pelican Harbor for 3 years coming up in August, and everything about my field is absolutely amazing. But one of my favorite things about wildlife medicine is the enrichment portion, and I'm very passionate about it, and I'm really excited to be able to share that with you guys and teach you a little bit about what we do at Pelican Harbor. So we're going to start off with our mission statement. So our mission at Pelican Harbor Seabird Station is dedicated to the rescue, rehabilitation, and release of sick, injured, or orphaned brown pelicans, seabirds, and other native wildlife, and the preservation and protection of these species through educational and scientific means. Our vision statement at Pelican Harbor Seabird Station is, as a trusted wildlife rehab center, Pelican Harbor Seabird Station embodies professionalism, compassion, and integrity. Through innovation, education, and outreach, we provide the highest quality of patient care while promoting the importance of conservation in the community. So what we're talking about today is the importance of patient enrichment. I'm going to go over why enrichment is important, the different types of enrichment, and give you tons of examples what we use at Pelican Harbor. Most of those examples are going to be of cute, amazing animals, and I have some videos as well. Why is enrichment important? That is one question that all of our interns ask us when I ask them to do enrichment. So enrichment is very important because you have patients in care. Yes, they have injuries, but you also have to provide some type of enrichment to make sure they're going in the right direction and continuing care and being able to be released. There's one reason why enrichment is important. Critical thinking, development, prevent boredom, and self-harm. So attending to an animal's psychological needs is arguably equally as important as mending the animal's physical condition. One important thing is raising babies. So it's important that they can perform natural behaviors such as perching, climbing, foraging before they are release ready. Something as simple as critical thinking. Babies specifically or head trauma patients, we need to know if they're able to forage for food. Crows specifically have a sense of awareness, so they require critical thinking to keep themselves engaged. And then one huge thing is to prevent boredom and self-harm. This is mainly for our education animals that are there long-term in the same enclosures. Animals that are bored, that don't have stimuli, such as something as simple as changing their environment weekly or bi-weekly, introducing them different types of food, can start to create bad habits of hurting themselves, whether that be pulling out feathers or intentionally really hurting themselves. And that's not something that you want in a wildlife setting. So enrichment will help with all of these things. All right, so what type of enrichment should I use? The one thing you want to think about first is safety. So safety is always first. So at Pelican Harbor, we have created this enrichment binder. It has tons of things in here on different types of enrichment you can use based on different species, but one really big section in here is our safety first section. So when creating enrichment, you want to think what type of animal you're using it for. If you have, let's use a squirrel, for example. Squirrels have huge teeth. They're going to chew through everything. So when you're creating enrichment, you want to think about if this animal chews this up and they ingest it, is it going to be harmful to them? Or is it okay for them to eat? Is this bird going to get entangled in this and possibly cause any type of injury? So those are things you want to think about when creating enrichment. So we have different types of enrichment. We're going to go over two today. So we have habitat enrichment, and we have behavioral enrichment. So habitat enrichment is anything you provide to mimic the patient's natural environment and habitat. So if you just think about a specific animal, a great blue heron, we can talk about a great blue heron, you just want to think about what type of environment they're in, and then you're going to base whatever you give them into their enclosures based on that. So examples of habitat enrichment are branches for perching and climbing. We have greenery for tree dwellers or shrubs for ground dwellers, such as mourning doves. Some type of water source. If it's a pelican, we have large pools at Pelican Harbor for them to swim in and dive down and catch fish. or maybe it's a shorebird that kind of walks at the edge of the pool, and we also have those for them as well. Then you think about substrate, if they need sand, if they have pebbles, grass, and then last but not least is areas to hide and sleep. If you have a patient that burrows in trees, tree cavities like eastern screech owls, you want to provide them with nest cavities. If you have possums that, you know, kind of a lot of people see them underneath their houses, sleeping in little crevices and things like that, we'll provide them with little homes to sleep in to keep themselves comfortable. So those are main examples of habitat enrichment. And then the next, we're going to go into some pictures of what we've done at Pelican Harbor Seabird Station. So this first picture is one of our old patients. And as you can see, this owl is perched on this big branch in there. There's greenery around him. So these birds are not commonly found in cities or urban areas. I believe this species came to us northwest of here, so way out where there's tons of trees and everything. So you want to mimic that habitat. So what we did is provide perching. That would be natural perching they would find out in the wild, as well as greenery to kind of mimic him being, you know, in trees. Next, I have two pictures of enclosures that I recently set up for this PowerPoint. So the one on the left, if you look in that back right corner, you'll see a Virginia opossum in that carrier. So that's actually Basil. She's one of our educational ambassadors at Pelican Harbor Seabird Station. So we set up this nice enclosure for her. Possums, we give them hidey homes. They like to hide in places to sleep. And then we provide them with a bunch of branches because they do climb, lots of greenery to mimic, you know, treetops, as well as greenery on the ground to give them more of a sense of an environment that they're used to. The pebbles are not something specific for them. It's more just that it's more sanitary and clean, but it's good to give them different types of surfaces to walk on, to touch. This provides different senses of stimuli for them, as well as preventing them from getting any type of pressure sores from having the same substrates every single day while they're there. The next picture on the right is an enclosure set up for gray squirrels. So gray squirrels, obviously climbing in trees all the time. So they have tons of branches in there to climb on. We have regular tree branches to mimic a natural environment. And we also have been using bungee cords for squirrels and for birds to perch on because it's not so hard and firm. It gives when they land on it. So they kind of have to get used to the feeling of swaying branches in the wild, and it helps build their muscles and their confidence when perching. We also provided them with tons of greenery for them, as well as hidey homes for them to sleep in. These next examples are actually from inside enclosures. So the ones previously were from outside enclosures. So these ones inside, once animals reach a specific time in their recovery, whether they have injuries or if they're young babies, we end up providing them with different types of enrichment inside as well. So on the left, you'll see, I think there's 3 or 4 northern mockingbirds in there. Actually, there's 5. Northern mockingbirds in there, and again, songbirds and trees all the time. So we want to make sure that we provide them with the appropriate perching and greenery that they'll see outside. And the reason we like to do it inside as well is they go through these different stages. So a lot of times we'll get them in as nestlings, and we'll have them in a nice little nest, which I will show you, I believe, in the next slide. And then once they get a little bit older, they become pre-fledged or fledglings, and they start to perch. So you want to incorporate different things for them to start perching on, to learn how to do that, build up those muscles, and then we'll upgrade them to a larger cage where they have more room to stretch out. We'll give more perching, we'll give greenery, and this way it's not as overwhelming when they move outside to a larger enclosure and they get all of this extra stimuli. It's kind of slowly progressing them up to that. On the right side, we have 2 eastern screech owls, are also older nestlings. So we do right below them have a nest with like natural substrate in there, like tree branches and stuff. But then also you can see that they've decided they don't need the nest anymore. They're going to start perching. So they're perching on all of our substrate in there. The next slide is on the right is what we normally provide our nestlings. We provide them with a different type of nest. So sometimes people will bring in the actual nest, but we don't like to use those, one, because they can have parasites in them and we don't want to introduce that into our animals. And a lot of urban areas, the nests have pollution. So you'll find strings, you'll find human hairs, you'll find trash. So we just discard that and we make our own nests that are more sanitary and easy to clean. So it's basically like their normal nest, nice, comfy, cozy area. An important reason to give them a specific type of nest, it seems so simple, but if you provide a nestling with too much leg room, their legs will grow farther apart, and this way it allows them to grow properly if they're in a nice snug nest, and then you're not causing any other issues in the long run. On the left, this is not our typical nest that we give nestlings, but this group of blue jays was almost ready to leave the nest, so I upgraded them. They weren't quite ready, so I gave them this little sofa so they can kind of hang out, and then honestly, a couple hours later, they jumped right out and started perching, so they were ready to go. And this one right here, these are a group of opossums that we had in care. They're inside a giant gourd. That way they can get all cozied up and snuggle. Opossums, as some of you may know, they spend a lot of their young life inside the mother's pouch. And other than that, they'll be kind of hanging on to her until they're ready to move on their own. So although this doesn't mimic a mom opossum, but it mimics kind of like a cozy, warm, safe environment for them to go into. Before I move on to the next slide, those are just some examples of habitat enrichment. So the one thing that you want to think about for habitat enrichment is just their habitat. What animal specifically you have, what type of habitats they're in, whether it be a shorebird, a seabird, a marsh bird, a squirrel, a possum. Those are very important things to think about, and then what you would find out in the wild. So next we have behavioral enrichment. This is our second category of enrichment. So behavioral enrichment is anything you provide to encourage natural behaviors and cognitive stimulation. With different objectives, animals are stimulated for investigation and exploratory behaviors. Animals with a higher form of intelligence need to be more mentally stimulated to excite their cognitive ability. So let's go back to that. Animals with a higher form of intelligence. Corvids, the family corvids, which is a group of songbirds, are highly intelligent. They include ravens, crows, blue jays, and they're all very intelligent. As some of you might have seen before, crows have seen being taught how to play fetch. There's a wildlife center, can't remember where it's at, but they taught their education crow how to pick up bottles to recycle, which I think is really cool that you can teach a bird to do stuff like that. So, and the next one would be raccoons. They're very aware of their surroundings. They're aware of themselves. They need a lot of stimuli to keep them growing and to encourage the stimulation and cognitive abilities that they do possess. So some examples of behavioral enrichment. We have food. So food is a huge thing for behavioral enrichment. Honestly, it's probably one of the easiest things you can do. You can provide them with food mazes. You can provide them with dirt bins with worms in them, hanging feeders, ice pops. Hanging feeders seems a little odd to provide a wildlife animal because it's not something that they would naturally find in their habitat, but it is something that they will most likely always find in their habitat. So if there's ever an instance that you release a brand new bird and maybe the area they went to, they really are having a hard time finding food, but they see a bird feeder, they'll know that that's a source of food for them. So that's one thing you can add to their enclosure to mimic something that they may see in the wild to give them other options. And then dog toys and cat toys seems very odd to give, but with the corvids, you need to keep them active and not bored because you don't want to cause self-harm. You want to keep them developing in the right manner. So a lot of times with our fish crows that we have in, we'll give them different types of dog balls. The Kong toys, we'll stuff food in them. We'll give them the cat toys with the feather, and they love that stuff to play with it. They're very curious, so that way they can kind of see how things are working. The next one would be live prey. So we do like to provide some of our animals with live mice or live insects. That way we know that they're not just learning how to eat dead things from a bowl. We know that they can actually hunt prey and learn how to catch specific things, because they'll need to know how to do this in the wild, especially when we're raising babies. It's important to make sure that they learn those behaviors. And the next one would be scents. So you can provide animals with essential oils. Some places do perfumes, but those might be too strong. So essential oils or even like spices. If you have a cage with opossums that have a really strong sense of smell, that's their main system that they use, then you can do this to give them enrichment. Just put a little of essential oil on a branch, and that way they have different senses and they can kind of, learn that behavior that they'll see in the wild. So our first examples that we have of behavioral enrichment are food enrichment, my favorite, because it's the easiest. So on the left, we have some coconuts that we cut open, and we just put all of their food in there. Yes, it's really simple. It doesn't really require them to pull anything open or anything like that, but this kind of gets them in the habit of not looking for a plate. Because if you're constantly giving animals a plate, maybe they will get used to that. In the wild, obviously, they're not going to have that. So this way, it's a more natural food bowl, as you can say. And inside there, too, the coconut is still attached and the inside, the fruit. So they're able to pull all of that out. So it does kind of mimic foraging behavior. On the right side is very similar. This is a papaya, I believe. We scooped out the center and just filled in the opossum diet. I think we ended up giving this to Basil, our educational possum, and she actually ate the whole thing. So she ate the bowl and everything. So the good thing about these is they can eat the actual bowl that the food is in. Next, we have these ice pops that one of our lovely interns made a couple weeks ago. So we actually bought this fish-shaped ice cube tray, and inside it, there's just water, fish, mealworms. I think there's some mango in there. And this one was specifically made for opossums. But we do make them for birds. We make them for raptors, seabirds, anything. And specifically, this isn't really meant for them to eat. It's not so much like a replacement of their diet. They'll still get their diet on top of this. This is more of just a behavioral enrichment to either spark their curiosity, to encourage foraging behaviors. So if you have a raptor and you give them a frozen mouse and a block of ice, they're not going to eat the frozen mouse, but maybe they'll start picking at it and they'll be staring at it and trying to figure out how to get that out. And what they're learning there is something that they'll use in the wild on staring at this mouse. How do I get this mouse out of this area? So different things like that. For the birds, they'll just learn to pick at it. They're going to have to pick to open things up in the wild to eat. So this is one way to stimulate those natural behaviors. And then next is Basil again. As you can tell, we love Basil at Pelican Harbor. So before you play the video, this is a quick video of another food enrichment. Somebody purchased this toy for us. I think it's used for either cats or dogs, and it's to slow them down from eating too fast, but also to stimulate them to think on how to open stuff. So in this video, you'll see her struggle a little bit, but she'll learn how to open these things based on her sense of smell. So if you want to go ahead and press play, Steph. And you can see she can smell all of that food in there. She's just trying to figure out how you get these things open. And we really like to do stuff like this for Basil since she is being raised captive. She's not out in the wild. We want to make sure that we keep her on her toes, keep her stimulated, always learning. We don't want her, to be bored and miserable at Pelican Harbor. We want to make sure that she has a really great life at Pelican Harbor. This one right here. So yes, this is not something that they would typically find in the wild. They're not going to find colored Easter eggs, or honestly, they probably won't even find flowers like this or a basket. But the reason we did this was just to give them a little extra excitement. So this was actually made for our benefit for a Easter post, but it also ended up being for their benefit. And just watching, I don't have a video on here, but watching the video of them from last year was just amazing. This blue jay right here kind of was curious at first. You could see him kind of like looking from eye to eye, seeing what's going on. And then once he was, brave enough, he hopped on over, he kind of pecked at the eggs. He pecked at the flower a little bit, and then I put mealworms on the bottom so to get their attention, and he'd go down, he'd pick out the mealworms and eat them, and he'd fly away and come back and peck at the eggs. So this is a blue jay. They're part of the corvid family, very smart species of birds. So you want to keep them cognitively stimulated, spark their interest. So this was one thing to kind of help at that, get them out and see different things in their environment. And this one is not the best video. It's the best one I could see. This is a Virginia opossum we have in care, a young one, and we have these hamster wheels that we put inside their enclosures. So no, they're not going to find hamster wheels, but when they're inside, before they're ready to go out, they still need to learn specific behaviors. They need to make sure they know how to climb and things like that. So we provide them with perching inside their enclosures. We provide them with greenery, and we also provide them with these wheels. And at first we weren't sure if they were going to use them, but they love them. They run on them, and all you hear is the squeaking noise all day long. And it's a good way for them to get exercise while they're inside, and also just get used to running and walking and stuff, because when they're at this age, a lot of times they're still with mom and she's doing a lot of the running and walking for them. So you want to press play. And it's very quick. He's a little skeptical at first, and then he just starts running. It's really cute to see. A lot of times they won't start running on it right away, but they're very, very curious animals. So they'll go up to it, kind of like put their paw on it, and it'll move, and they'll look around, and then they'll get on it and not realize what's going on, and then they just pick it up and just run all day long. And then another video. So this is a fish crow that we have at the Seabird Station. This is another really simple form of food enrichment. Instead of doing like a normal plate where they can just easily pick everything up, I decided to use an ice cube tray. This way he kind of has to go into all of these little areas. It seems very simple, but it's one way to stimulate them, get them used to how they may have to eat in the wild. And I also put live food in there too. So whenever she presses play, you'll be able to see him be very curious, watching and seeing what's going on, and then he goes to find the live prey. And I took the sound out because there's a lot of back noise. That way you can specifically just focus on what he's doing. So you see he has a superworm or the waxworm, spits it out. This is an eggshell. Eggshells can be a good source of calcium for them. So a lot of times we'll sprinkle little pieces on it, but this one was specifically put in there just for enrichment, to take egg out, to cause a barrier between the live prey. So he actually has to move things around and forage for what he wants. He kind of played with it for a little bit and then decided to eat it. And as you can see how he's kind of looking around, he's curious. He's curious on what the heck is in front of him, first of all, and two, things are moving around. I need to pay attention and see what's going on. Is this my source of prey? And then he goes ahead and tries to eat it. So, I gotta catch up. So there are a couple other categories of enrichment. We have visual enrichment, which is typically provided by changing the animal's enclosure. So, once a week we do weigh all of our patients outside. So in that time, after we deep clean it, we do rearrange things, whether it's the same stuff and just moved around, or if we take it out and completely remodel the whole thing with different branches, different perching, hidey homes, toys, where they get their food, where they get their water. Just changing things up is really important. The next one is olfactory, so smell and taste enrichment. It involves the introduction of new scents, such as spices or essential oils, to their environment, which we briefly touched on as well. The next one is auditory, so sound. Habitat sounds and conspecific vocalization is important. When we have baby songbirds in, a lot of times it's instinctual for them to learn their calls, but we do like to play calls of adults of their species. That way they're used to hearing it and they'll start picking it up and mimicking it in rehab. One other way that we use auditory enrichment is when we have baby raptors. if once they come in and they're not eating on their own yet, we'll do something called tongue feeding. And a lot of times they're not interested, they're scared of you. But once you play the call of their same species mom, they perk right up, they start looking around, they start making little sounds to try to figure out where it's coming from. You put food in front of them, they start eating. So that's one thing that really helps us in rehab setting. The next one is tactile, so touch, providing different textures. Like I kind of mentioned, tactile is really important. One, different textures of things that they will find in the wild, but also to prevent them from getting any type of sores or pressure sores from themselves, having only the same type of textures and things in their enclosure. So that was it. So if anybody has any questions, it's very brief. But enrichment, it might seem very simple, which, I mean, it is very simple, but it just causes you to get into your creative juices. So you really just have to think about the animal specifically, what species it is, their natural history, how they eat, what you can introduce to them, those specific things, and then you can go from there. And honestly, the sky's the limit. One thing that I really like to do was look on zoo websites. They do incredible enrichment for a lot of their patients. They make paper mache of fake dead animals for the turkey vultures and black vultures to pull apart. So anything like that you can think of that's just stimulating and will encourage natural behaviors is very important to do. You know what, there was one, I'm not sure who asked it and if they're still present, but one of the questions was, how can young animals learn natural behaviors in rehab initially to get them to be successful once released? So I actually answered this earlier to make sure I was prepared in case you were here. So one thing that's extremely important is making sure when you have young birds, young mammals, that you're raising them with conspecifics, so species that are the same or from the same family. This way they kind of learn from each other, they feed off of each other, they know what they're supposed to look like, they know what they're supposed to sound like, what they're supposed to do. One thing too, if you have a really young one, you have one that's slightly older, they can learn like an older sibling. And a lot of this is instinctual. It's just their instincts kick in and they just know what to do. But some of the stuff you really do have to introduce things to make sure they know how to do it. So providing them with appropriate enrichment to encourage natural behaviors is extremely important for that as well.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I know sometimes depending on the species, in the clinic, you guys will wear kind of masks to make sure, or use puppets to make sure the babies don't kind of relate humans to food. Does that kind of count as enrichment?
Yeah, I would like to say that counts as enrichment. I don't know which category I'd put it in. I feel like it could be a little bit of in both, because habitat enrichment, like if they're used to their babies and their parents are in their habitat, but I guess it would be mainly behavioral enrichment. That way they're not getting used to seeing you feeding them. They're not getting used to humans and getting habituated. So we have like a little Eastern screech owl puppet that we'll use a lot. And once they see that and they hear the calls, they get so excited. And that's definitely a type of behavioral enrichment for them. And it kind of gets them away from being in the stressful environment and they feel safe again. So that's a good thing that you want. Does anybody else have any questions? I'm happy to answer them all.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Miguel. I was just wondering, do birds sleep hanging onto the branch, or do you have to get them a soft bed like that sofa you have for the birds?
No, they will either sleep in their nests if they have nests, or yeah, they'll just kind of sleep perching wherever they're at on a branch or things like that. The sofa was not normally what we provide them. It was just kind of what I had at the moment, but they'll sleep kind of in a crouched position, perched up.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Somebody had asked about nutrition. So I guess it looked like they were interested in knowing about the nutrition aspect. I
saw that. So when it comes to enrichment, you don't really, I mean, you do, but you don't really focus like nutrition, like, oh, I want to make sure I'm getting all of this right stuff. Because a lot of time enrichment is something that's added on top of whatever their basic diet is. So it's not something where you're specifically targeting their diet and making sure it's right. That's something that's already going to happen. So whatever type of enrichment you provide will be on top of that. So again, with the nutrition, if they are only supposed to get a specific amount of protein, if you're making food enrichment, you don't want to add more protein to that, maybe add something else. But it will just be another supplement on top of that. It's not their main primary source of diet. Someone just asked, you use puppets for raptors, you don't need for birds or mammals. So a lot of times we will use the puppets, or we'll cover our face, whether it's with like a camo shield or something, because the raptors do seem to get habituated a lot easier. When it comes to the songbirds, you do a lot of hand feeding. And initially, they do seem a little kind of friendly towards you just because they don't know yet that they're supposed to be scared of you. But once they go through the specific stages from nestling to fledgling to juvenile and adult, they gradually start to learn that they don't like you, especially when they start eating on their own. They'll no longer want to be around you. They'll no longer want to eat from you. And then once they get upgraded to outside, they already know that they don't like you and they wild up very quickly. But again, that also comes with how we do our rehab. So our patients are only seen by us. They only see us when they need to be cleaned, weighed, and fed. Other than that, they are completely isolated from us. We are not, hanging around them all the time. We make sure that they're, in a dark, quiet area away from us as much as possible. And with mammals, it's honestly the same way. You have to handle them a lot for feeding, but once they're not being fed, you put them away, you don't touch them, you don't talk to them and things like that. And once they move outside, they don't want anything to do with you.
Barb asked, how does enrichment for water birds work? And I'm actually going to share a video for you guys to look at later. But Tori, if you want to answer that, I have a video of the pelicans eating fish from a pumpkin.
So I actually have like a whole section on that in my binder. And there's different, I
was going to say, Barb says, how does it differ with water birds?
So shorebirds versus water birds? Was that the question?
How does enrichment for water birds differ? So I guess from like corvids and mammals and stuff.
Good question. So it can just differ based on their habitat. So one, if you're talking about habitat enrichment, it'll change because if you have a shorebird or water bird, their habitat is either the ocean or the beach or a pond. But if you have like possums or corvids and things, they're going to be in more densely like tree areas and stuff. So that's one way habitat enrichment could change. And you can think about how they get their food as well. That could also help you decide on what type of habitat enrichment to provide. And when it comes to behavioral enrichment, a lot of things can be given the same. You just have to think about those safety restrictions. If something's more safe or not safe. If you have a big pelican, you don't want to provide them with a smaller ball that they're going to swallow and you're going to have to go in and get. So just thinking about safety and then just getting really creative. Like those ice pops can be given to anybody. So you can give them to them. Pelicans, when we have them in care, especially during breeding season, we like to give our rehab pelicans little sticks so that they, because that's when they're starting to breed, that's when they're starting to mate, they're starting to build nests. So that way they're kind of, not missing out and doing things that they would naturally be doing out in the wild. So it's not so much different. You can do a lot of the same stuff. You just have to think about the safety restrictions, I believe.
And Joyce asked if we have a list of animals that we do and don't accept.
Steph, do we have one on our website?
We have a page that's called resources on the website. I believe it does list out a couple of like the invasive species of Florida. But we treat all native wildlife, and we only don't treat like invasive species and rabies vector because we're too small to treat rabies vector right now, but we will in the future in our new home. But yeah, if you find an injured animal and you're not sure, just call us or text us and we can let you know for sure if it is or if it's not a species we can take in.
Yeah.
A lot of people that registered just said that they're interested in a future in wildlife and caring for animals and stuff. Do you mind just talking about like how you got into the field of wildlife
Yeah, of
rehab?
course. So, I always knew that I wanted to do something conservation based. I never knew exactly what I wanted to do. And when I was, going into college, I had no idea what wildlife rehab was, what a wildlife rehabilitator was. I didn't know that was a job. And when I was in college, I started volunteering at a local wildlife hospital called Crow on the other coast of Florida. Volunteered there for 2 years. And then after graduation, I decided to do a fellowship with them for 6 months. Volunteering there just really opened my eyes to this totally different world of animals coming in that are injured and them, being able to treat them and being able to do all these different things and treat all these different species. And that's where I learned what a wildlife rehabber was. And that's what sparked my interest. So I decided to apply for a fellowship with them. And I got a lot of very awesome firsthand experience handling, caring for, treating, creating enrichment for all different types of native Florida species to Southwest Florida. So that was really incredible. And then I was lucky enough 3 years ago to get hired on Pelican Harbor. And here I am so blessed to be able to care for patients. One of the reasons why I enjoy it so much is because there are wildlife species out there that get injured because of human interaction or human pollution. And that's one of my biggest things is being able to care for a patient that otherwise would have died due to human interaction or human pollution. So when we get birds in with fishing hook injuries or entanglement injuries, or unfortunately being shot by somebody, that way we can kind of intersect and help them and become their second chance and move them on and eventually release. So it's very rewarding to be able to treat these patients, and specifically, like I said, the ones that are injured due to humans in any sort of way. So someone else asked. So someone's asking about the internship, which you're in luck because I'm the internship manager, so I can answer your question. So we don't we don't turn anybody away based on their experience level, their backgrounds, or anything like that. But we do, put favor to interns that are interested in a career with conservation medicine or becoming a vet or vet tech or any type of conservation field, just because sometimes those things are really hard to come by and a lot of people do need experience for that. But we have had plenty of interns that have come through, like one of our interns right now, which I think she's on the call, Melena, is a nurse, a human nurse, and she interns with us. One of our other interns was an accountant, and she was changing her career field. So we were actually her first source of, into the field of wildlife medicine. But a lot of times the people that do apply are specifically people that are trying to pursue a career within the biology sciences, veterinary medicine, things like that. But if you're more interested in our internship program, just go onto our website and you'll find my email, and just shoot me an email with any questions you have, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about it.
I'll put your email in the chat. So if anybody is interested in asking about the internship and stuff, you can get in touch with Tori. And we also have volunteer opportunities. So if you guys are interested in volunteering with us and rescuing animals and stuff, you can visit our website or email Kiki. She's our volunteer manager, to see what opportunities we have for you. But we love our intern team and our volunteer team.
Yeah, we definitely couldn't do it without them. We are a very small hospital and we require a lot of extra hands. So if you join our team, we'd be more than happy, but even just your support is enough for us as well.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Tori. This is great. We have another webinar next month with Dr. Schneider, one of our vets that works in the hospital. She's going to be going over wildlife radiology. So if you guys are interested in that, make sure to register at pelicanharbor.org/webinars. And yeah, thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you so much.
Bye.